Welcome back to the channel, guys. Hope you all had a great weekend. Today, in this Ask Elvis video, we're going to be answering questions on Ferrari potentially having a troubled start to pre-season already. Could they possibly run two completely different cars in testing? We're going to be talking about the F1 budget cap coming in 2021 and how it might be policed. Could teams start diverting funds to other departments within their organisations? And the big one, amongst many others, how do Formula One teams decide who's going to be sitting in the car for pit stop practice? That and loads more. Stick with me. Welcome to another Ask Elvis. There you go. For those of you who've been missing the dogs, like I have because I was away last week, they're back. Right, let's get stuck into some questions then. Right, we're going to start with this one from Samuel A. Moore on Twitter. He says, how much leeway do teams have to change their livery throughout the year? More than helmet changes for drivers? I'm thinking of the German GP and what Mercedes did. Okay, so this is quite a topic of quite a lot of discussion at various times over recent years. I think Zach Brown made some comment in a year or so ago about how perhaps the rules on this should be relaxed, but the regulations say, and this is the sporting regulations of course, they say that teams have to present their cars in substantially the same livery at each event. Now, substantially the same livery, of course, is open to a little bit of interpretation. It does allow for things like sponsor changes over the course of a season, but it also allows for little bits of tweaks like what Mercedes did. Now, you could say that was a substantially different livery, and I suspect, and I don't actually know the answer to this if I'm really honest, but I suspect they would have had to run that by the relevant authorities to get some permission to make sure that it was okay. I think there's nobody being so super strict that anyone would actually stop that from happening. It was a special occasion, it was a celebration, and actually if we look at those kind of things, I mean, aren't they good for the sport? Don't they generate a little bit of additional interest? So the answer is the regulations say they've got to be substantially similar. In reality though, if somebody wants to do a special one-off, what Mercedes proved at the German GP was that it's definitely possible. There's this question from Johnny Marshall around tyre regulation. He says, hi Elvis, one thing I've always wondered since the end of refuelling and the sometimes boring one-stop strategy races, why don't they make it mandatory to use all three tyre compounds during a race? Guaranteed 2 stops and less tyre management can only be a good thing, no? Well Johnny, I kind of agree with you. That's my opinion. I totally agree with you, in fact. You know, we already mandate 1 pit stop, so why not mandate 2? You know, we complain at times about the fact we have one-stop races, so why not mandate 2? You know, you can argue it's artificial, but we already mandate 1. That's artificial enough, isn't it? So yes, I agree with you. I think if races are deemed to be better, more interesting, more unpredictable, more exciting, with more pit stops, there's nothing to stop us doing that. Having said that, it was one of the changes that Formula One themselves tried to push through with the raft of new regs that were on the cards, only to be shut down and voted down by the teams. By the way, on that subject, I'm sure loads of you are shouting at your screens, why on earth are the teams allowed to shout down or vote down rules like this? Why can't the rule makers make the rules? Well, that is one of the things that will be changing for 2021. Part of the governance process will change to stop exactly that from happening. Chris A on YouTube asks, Mark, which F1 champs currently in F1 do you think will retire first? Raikkonen, Hamilton or Vettel? Raikkonen would seem the most likely since he'll be out of contract sooner and has been in F1 the longest of the current grid, but he might not. What do you think? Well look, I actually do. I do think Kimi will go at the end of the 2020 season. But look, we've thought that before. He seems like he can go on forever, but I suspect he will be moving on after the end of this current season. But so, you know, you'd say probably he is the most obvious, but Sebastian Vettel's also out of contract at the end of this year. And that for me is the bigger question. You know, what happens to Sebastian Vettel now? And this is a, you know, you could do a whole other video on this, and I'd love to know your opinions on this. But should he go? Should he stay? Should Ferrari keep him on? And should Sebastian want to stay on at Ferrari? They've obviously put all of their commitment behind Charles Leclerc. That's the future of Ferrari. Does Sebastian want to settle into perhaps what was formerly Kimi's role, backing up the main driver? I don't think he does. He's always said that when he no longer enjoys Formula One, he'll walk away. And I suspect a lot of it will depend, of course, on this season, how it goes, how the car is and how he performs up against his teammate. But we've all seen what Charles is capable of up against Sebastian. We've all seen Sebastian make so many mistakes. If something like that happens and the media turn against him, perhaps his team and his fans even start to turn against him, this will be the last we see of him, certainly in a Ferrari. Could he go anywhere else? Personally, I can't see it. There was potentially a chance he might have gone back to Red Bull, but I can't see that now that they've committed to Max Verstappen for the long term as well. So I can definitely see a scenario where both Kimi and Sebastian walk away from F1 at the end of this year. By the way, on that same subject, there is still a scenario that could see Lewis Hamilton walk away from the sport at the end of 2020, but I think it's highly unlikely. You know, it kind of depends a little bit on what Mercedes decide to do. At the end of the day, Mercedes, as with all of the teams, no one signed a contract, no one signed an agreement to stay in Formula One beyond the current agreement that exists, and that ends at the end of 2020. There is still a scenario that says Mercedes could walk away, and therefore Lewis Hamilton is without his current seat. But I do think that one's highly unlikely. I think Mercedes will stay at least for a bit longer, and I certainly think Lewis will want to smash the records, the big records that he's closing in on. I kid you not, I've just watched two people getting out of the water after a swim. It's the middle of January, it's absolutely freezing. That's hardcore. Fair play to him. Hi. Kishore Kafle says, are there any discussions about which mechanic will get to drive the car for pit stop practice, or is it already documented somewhere? So the answer on that is that actually it's not normally a mechanic. The reason for that is that most of the mechanics, in fact if not all the mechanics, are involved in the pit stop somehow. So it has to be someone who's not involved in pit stops. So typically that could be anybody that kind of sort of fits in the car. And in my time we used to use some of the guys from the catering department. We would use occasionally a kind of an engineer that might have come out of the factory for the weekend. Somebody who, first of all, it might be a great experience, but secondly, they've just got to be capable to stomp on the brakes at the right time and small enough to fit in the car. But the reality is, there's not normally an argument over it. The team normally just picks somebody and asks them if they want to do it. Typically, the answer is yes. Mark Hennon asks this one. He says, what happens to a chassis after it's been damaged beyond usable or safe repair? Do they get patched up and sold to museums and become display cars? Keep up the great vids. Thank you very much, Mark. So the answer to that question is pretty much yes, exactly as you said. If it's damaged beyond repair in terms of it's not safe to use again as a race chassis, it will get patched up quite often and used for what they call static show cars or static display cars, where they're sat in a museum but will never turn a wheel on a racetrack again. The other thing they go and do is they need chassis for the simulator, the driver in the loop simulator at the Formula One team's factories. That's the simulator where the driver sits in, of course, drives around the circuit and gives feedback. They need a real Formula One chassis for that role, so they often use the chassis that was either crash tested pre-season to pass the FIA crash test, because that of course can never race, or they will use a chassis that may have been damaged in a race at some stage. And the other thing they can go for which I guess is still a static show car, is quite often the drivers have contracts which say that, you know, if they win a race or if they win the championship, they'll get to keep one of the cars. And highly likely that that will end up being a static show car. Occasionally I've known drivers to buy an old chassis or an old car from a Formula 1 team because it might have been something special to them. So those kind of things are all the uses that can happen to a race damaged or a crashed chassis that can no longer turn a wheel on a racetrack again. At Mode Push asks this one, he says, how does money equal more development in F1? Don't the teams already have the aerodynamicists hired? How does more money make them develop the car more? Well, it simply, in the most basic terms, comes down to quite often more people. So more aerodynamicists, more people looking at different things. And the way that manifests itself is that the bigger teams are able to develop more strands on a car. So they're able to go down more different development paths, bringing those parts to the point of production and testing, getting them into wind tunnels, that kind of thing, getting them onto the real car, perhaps on a Friday at the Grand Prix. The smaller teams that don't have that budget just simply don't have the personnel or the manufacturing capability to go through that process at the same rate. So they have to be much more selective on the actual developments that they pursue, that they actually develop to the point of production. And that's what makes the biggest difference. You know, if you've got a department of 100 aerodynamicists, 100 different people looking at different things, different strands of development, your chances of finding something that really works is far greater than if you've got a team of 10 aerodynamicists looking in those areas. It's simple mathematics, and that tends to be how it works. More people and more production capability. That means better equipment, better production facilities. It also can manifest itself in things like the simulation tools that teams have, because if you're able to simulate more things more quickly, again, you can weed out the ideas that perhaps don't have any potential to go anywhere, whereas the smaller teams might have to pursue those ideas until they find that they're not going anywhere, where the bigger teams will have a simulation tool that will be able to say very quickly, let that one go, boys, let's work on something else. Come on, good boys. Good boys. Right, we'll finish this off at home. Better. Right, let's talk Ferrari, because Scott Deal, clearly a Ferrari fan, says, hi Mark, I've read some reports that Scuderia Ferrari is worried about his 2020 F1 car. Judging from my profile pic, you might have guessed that I'm worried about a season of hanging my head. What do you make of these early 2020 season reports? Well, Scott, I'll tell you what I make of these early season reports, and you're not the only person to comment on this. It's just rumours, and that is all it is, and I will never ever take any of these pre-season rumours seriously. And the reason for that is that, you know, I've been on the other side of this. I've been on the inside. I've been working away in a factory or even at pre-season testing where you actually know exactly what is going on. And I've been sitting there reading stuff that the F1 media has written because of some speculation or someone putting 2 and 2 together and coming up with 5. The only people who can possibly know whether Ferrari are in trouble at this point are Ferrari themselves. And if they are hardly likely to come out and start reporting that or telling that to media representatives. And the reality is, even if they're not happy with their car at this stage, there is still quite a significant period of time before we go racing in March in Australia to be able to rectify things, particularly if you're a team like Ferrari. So, Scott, try not to worry, try not to keep you awake at night over this sort of thing, because it's just rumours and that is simply it. So I make nothing of these early season reports. I will wait until we see the cars on track. That will give us the first impression in testing. But as we all saw very clearly from last year's testing, and we've seen many, many times before, even pre-season testing is not a good enough judge because you just don't know what is going on, what the team are up to. The only people who know that are the team themselves. And the first time we'll get a true picture of the team putting everything on the line is when it comes to that first race down in Melbourne. Now, on a similar subject, Matthew Butcher says, I've read that Ferrari could run 2 completely different cars in testing. If you had all the designs finished, how quickly could you manufacture an F1 car? Love the videos, doing an awesome job. Thanks very much, Matthew. Okay, so first of all, could Ferrari run 2 cars in season testing? Absolutely. That's not 2 cars on each day, of course, we can't do that. What we can do though, like Mercedes did last year, is bring 2 different cars to the 2 different tests. What Mercedes proved last year, that's a really shrewd move in the current era of Formula 1 where testing's so limited. This year even more so, just 3 days in each of the 2 tests. And what Mercedes did was stop production or stop development at a certain cut-off point where they knew they could develop or produce that car in time for that first week of testing. So you have a date, which is when the car has to leave the factory to get to the test, the first test. That's your absolute deadline when everything has to be finished, ready, assembled, completed and loaded into a truck. You can work back from that, however many weeks or months, to get to a point where you have to stop development on that particular strand or that line of development on your car, and that is the car you're committing to for the first week. That's what Mercedes did. What that gives you is an opportunity to run things like the power unit, the gearbox, you know, the most basic components of your setup, to put mileage on them. That first week's test is all about putting mileage on things, making sure nothing's going to break. So that's why the absolute outright performance doesn't really matter until the second week of testing. Now, it may not sound like very much to leave yourself another week or another 2 weeks of development. In Formula 1 terms though, that's enormous. The amount of stuff that happens over the course of a week, and even beyond that, over the course of a couple of weeks, is huge in Formula 1 terms. So yes, you have your cut-off point for the first test, but it allows you a bit of extra time to start really developing in the areas that you know you'll be able to find gains over the course of another week or 2. In doing so, you bring what is much closer to your finished product ready to that second test to be able to start working more on performance. You've hopefully proved out your reliability in test 1. Test 2 is where you start bringing the upgrades, the full aerodynamic package, and start really testing that, see what performance you can get out of it. Here's a good one from Harvey Howell, who says, hi Mark, with it being the F1 off-season, I've had to adapt to Formula E, and that made me think, how long do you think Formula 1 can stay on top in tech and racing terms? As I honestly think Formula E is better for pure racing, and it's electric, the future, apparently. What can F1 do? Well, Harvey, that is exactly what 2021 and the discussions that are already happening about 2025 are all about. What can Formula 1 do? What Formula 1 can do is some of the things they are doing. For 2021, they're trying to make a car that's much more stylised. I guess a little bit like the way Formula E have already gone with their Generation 2 car. They're trying to make the racing much closer so that in terms of an entertainment spectacle, the racing's better to watch. You're absolutely right. And in fact, I agree with you, and this might sound controversial, but I agree with you that I think the racing is better in Formula E. And that's because it's closer. And that's partly because the cars are much closer. The areas of development are limited or restricted in Formula E to the electric drivetrain. That means the performance differences between each car are much smaller, and therefore the cars on track are much closer and able to race much harder together. That's what Formula 1 is trying to achieve, or trying to get closer to, in 2021. So if we can get better racing, we have a better product, more people will watch, and it becomes more and more popular. That's the idea. In terms of technology, well, 2021 is not a giant leap forward in terms of technology. It is on the aerodynamic side, of course, but not in terms of things like power units. But 2025 is when the next big propulsion change for a Formula 1 car is being discussed. I did a video on it, how Formula 1 is looking at things like two-stroke technology, looking at things like hydrogen propulsion. Those kind of technologies could be the thing that catapult Formula 1 back to the leading edge of that technological advancement, where the rest of the world follows Formula 1 rather than Formula 1 following the rest of the world. Behind the Scenes on YouTube says, how did you find the adjustment from being in the thick of F1 to walking away from it? Well, I mentioned this, didn't I, in the video last week about Jean Todt. If you haven't seen that one, check it out. I'll link it up in the corner, up here, wherever side it is, and I'll link it at the end of the video in the comments as well. But yeah, I talked about walking away from Formula One when it was no longer right for me, when it didn't suit my lifestyle. How did I find that? Well, I found it really hard in the beginning because my whole life up until that point, certainly my whole working life, had been in Formula One in the pit lane. You know, that was everything that I had done, everything I'd known in terms of my working life. So yeah, I found it really hard to step away from that. And part of that is that you step away from the intense, high-pressure lifestyle that Formula One is. You step away from the incredibly hard working environment, the long hours, you know, and part of that was nice, but part of that is a strange thing to get used to because you've been doing it for so long. And I'll tell you, over time, of course, you get used to it. You start to find new things in your life that replace it, I guess, that that fulfill you. And for me, I've been able to do that. I'm very lucky. I've been able to find a second career, if you like, that is equally as fulfilling as the first one, equally as much of a dream career as my first career was. I'm incredibly lucky, I know that, to have that. I'll tell you the one thing I could never replace, and I still miss to this day, and that's pit stops. The adrenaline rush that comes with being in a Formula One pit stop, I find it very hard to describe it. People often talk to me and ask me, what's it like? It's an incredibly difficult thing to describe, particularly back in the old days when they were coming in extremely hot, extremely fast. The noise was a lot more than it is today. The engines were bouncing off the rev limiter at 21,000 RPM, just a metre away from your face. The heat emanating off that is burning you. The noise is rattling your bones to pieces. You're being shaken to bits. And then this wheel, this tyre that's literally right in front of your face starts lighting up, spinning, wheel spinning, spitting bits of dust and stones out the back. This incredible noise, and it screeches away from you right under your nose. It's amazing. And you can tell by the way my face is lighting up. That's the thing I miss. That adrenaline buzz is, well, I think irreplaceable. But there you go. So that's how I found it. Difficult in the beginning. I found a way to address it and deal with it, and now I'm very happy. I love what I do today, but I still miss pit stops. Another Formula E related question. Philip Gonzalez says, after watching the Santiago E-Prix, what a race. It was good, wasn't it? I'm hoping you can explain how the race cars generate aero grip, particularly the underbody. It didn't seem flat or utilised like F1 cars will do in 2021. Basically, the grip from those machines, or the grip that those machines have, seems to come from nowhere. Okay, well, there's quite a simple answer from that. I mean, they do generate some grip from the underside. They have very little in the way of wings now in a Formula E car, but they do have a huge diffuser. So that generates a reasonable amount of grip from the diffuser. But the reality is, with a Formula E car, they actually just have very little grip. But because everybody has very little grip, the tyres are not very wide, they're not slicks, of course, in Formula E. This is all very deliberate. They don't have a huge amount of grip, which means it's a much more challenging operation for the driver to get it around the track quickly. They slide a lot more, but that means you get unpredictability. That means you get mistakes. And that is one of the reasons that Formula One racing is so spectacular. So the answer is, where do they get their grip from? They just don't have a lot of it. Right, here's a good one to finish on from Patrick. He says, hi, you talked in your last video about the budget cap. Could it be possible that teams redirect money they need to departments that are not impacted by this budget cap? Now, that's an interesting point and a good question. And lots of you have raised stuff like this. For example, could Mercedes or Ferrari do some of their development for the Formula One project in their road car divisions, for example? Could they transfer some of their budget that might be being spent on car development, on performance, into areas like the marketing departments? Is there some clever accounting that can be done to offset the restrictions that this budget cap is going to have on the bigger teams? The answer to that is probably yes. Probably yes, there is some of that that's going to be being played around with. So how do we police it? Well, the way the budget cap is being policed is that the teams have to submit pretty detailed accounts on a regular basis throughout the season. And of course, those accounts have to match up with the restrictions in the cost cap. But what's stopping them fiddling their accounts? Well, two things. First of all, a little bit like the way that the restrictions on wind tunnel time or CFD time work at the moment, where the teams still have to submit logs of the amount of time that the wind has been on in their wind tunnel, or the amount of time or the amount of usage from their CFD systems that they've been using. They have to self-police that. They have to submit that voluntarily. They have to submit it, but they have to do it themselves. There's nobody in there coming in, taking data, going through the files. They could do, and this is the same with the budget cap, the governing body have the opportunity to go in and do random checks and investigate should they think it's worthy or necessary. But the reality is that these kind of things are very much self-policing, because the penalties for getting it wrong or for cheating are going to be very severe. They have already stated that in a worst case scenario you could be disqualified from the championship if you have been deemed to have a serious and deliberate breach of these financial fair play rules. It's the first time we've had this in Formula One. It's the first time we've had any financial regulation. So it is going to take a little bit of time to settle down, to work out exactly how this should work, how it could work best, how we could adapt them if things are not proving right in the beginning. What's great is that we've started this process though, and it will take time, as I say. It will be a little bit tricky in the beginning. Now, I don't think teams will start diverting budget and doing development in other areas, because if that's deemed as being illegal, if that's deemed as being cheating, it's no different to having some major technical cheating infringement. You will be thrown out, you'll lose points, or you'll be thrown out of the championship. With the way Formula One is today, largely operated by major manufacturers who have to report to the board of directors of those major manufacturers, who are representing that brand on this global scale, they can't be seen to be cheating, because the negative impact that would have would far outweigh any advantage that trying to get around this cost cap could possibly have for them. The days of major cheating in Formula One, particularly for the big brands, I don't want to say they're gone, because you can never say they're totally gone. You never know who might push the boundaries, who might be desperate enough to get some success to try and do something like that. But I do think the world has changed, and because of the corporate nature and brand representation, big global brand representation in Formula One, it's much more likely that teams play by the rules than it used to be perhaps a few years ago. We'll have to wait and see. It's going to be interesting to see how these rules play out and how they start to develop, how we as an organisation of Formula One develop those rules, tweak them as and when they're needed to make them fit the sport better. But I do think, as I say, it's great that we've started the process. Right, I'm going to leave it there, folks. Thank you very much for all of your questions. Again, I totally appreciate them all. I really do. There were loads this week and I didn't get through them all. I have tried to answer as many as I can online in the comments as I can. Keep them coming, because I will always try and answer every question that comes in. So far, I'm just about managing to do that. So I hope you appreciate it. Keep them coming in, because I really am grateful for them. Thank you very much, as ever. It's don't forget, Wheeler Dealer's Dream Car. Another episode tonight, 9 PM if you're in the UK, on Discovery Channel. For those asking about it coming to the rest of the world, it is coming to the rest of the world very soon. I think if you're in the States, it comes to you in February, and it has different rollout dates around the world. I'm trying to find out what they are, and when I do, I will share them. But if you're in the UK, 9 PM Monday night on Discovery UK. Right, thanks very much, guys. Much appreciated. Have a great week. I'll see you very soon. But for now, ta-da.